and the intuitional. But let's see how this really plays out in practical dynamics. So here, lower mental, what really becomes very active is this force of questioning. And this is an incredibly powerful force. And this force of questioning has resulted in such global movements that we've seen in 2011, such as the Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, the anti-corruption movement in India, the Greek rebellion, which is part of as a result of the Greek debt crisis and also has its implications for the European Union sovereign debt crisis. So we have this questioning that's leading to rebellions of various kinds, and the risk with this is that this is great because on one side this is great because it's cutting us away from all this irrational storm system that is existing globally. So the force of questioning is now creating a different kind of ecosystem, and these movements are being led by this essential force of questioning. But if the questioning doesn't proceed deep enough, and here interestingly I'm going to draw the same pattern that we saw here now occurring in this stratosphere. So we have the seed, we have the stem, and we have the flower. And the point being, the questioning here, so we have a pattern that's repeating itself on different scales. So this pattern that is creating these different scenarios can also exist in any of these scenarios. And if we think of these three spheres or three layers within the mental, it's really a result of multiplying this pattern into the mental space, and we come up with three different layers. And this questioning is really about the existing state of things. It's not about what's possible, but about the existing state of things. So as a result, the risk is that the Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, the corruption movement, the Greek rebellion are too tethered to the past. And so what may result is some kind of isms and some kind of quasi-freedom, which is not really the true thing. And so what we have in this scenario is perhaps some kind of isms that may or may not result in something substantial and different. However, if you were to continue along this trajectory, then what we're going to arrive at is this force of deeper questioning. And this deeper questioning is in fact going to begin to break the anchor from the past and toward the future. And as a result, what's going to happen is that new structures, new organizations, new ways of being, of thinking, new ways of setting up community, this is what will emerge. And what we will likely see is a completely new set of, say, business models, holistic business models. So we may have holistic business models, we may have a completely enlightened way or a very holistic way to bring the European Union into a sustainable and lasting integration. We may have a completely different way to organize our global currencies. So instead of, say, having 2 or 3 or 1 strong currency, we may have a whole array of global currencies that can effectively play with each other. We may have the democratization of markets. So this is where power is to the people and not in some kind of elite circles that perhaps it can be argued is what's happening in these realms over here, the physical and the vital realm. So we have something that's very different and very possible if there's a force of deeper questioning. So if we break into this sphere of the higher mentality. But even that, at the end of the day, is not going to be enough to sustain ourselves, because the deeper questioning may result in these new structures and these new ways of organizing, but unless there is some kind of intuition. And here, interestingly, I had referred to this pattern that repeats itself. So we have this pattern here by which we've created these different scenarios. This pattern can also be seen, this pattern of sustainable progress can be seen if we cut across the mental sphere. But also, the fact of the matter is that this pattern is also the context within which we find all this global development taking place. And if we really see where are we, we'll see that we are somewhere at this stage breaking off from the general vital and emerging into a kind of truly more mental way of looking at things. And so there's this pattern that's repeating itself on different scale. And when we talk about this kind of stratosphere or this layer of intuition, what we're really saying is that what we'll see is the emergence of heroes and leaders. So heroes, leaders that reinterpret everything that exists, recontextualize the meaning of all our common dynamics and organizations and structures, so that instead of focusing on what the eye can see and what the past has created, we're beginning to focus on what's possible and what's in tune with the inner tide that connects this movement, this pattern that's existent in the DNA of circumstance at the micro level with the context of the macro level. So we'll see something very, very different emerging and forms and organizations that will become the organic outcome of this kind of deep touch that heroes and leaders will have with something that is really needed for the development of different regions of the world or different industries. And while I don't want to, there's a risk here of just generalizing or propping up some movements on a pedestal, but the fact is that if we think about, okay, what have we seen in the past that might give us a sense of what this looks like, a couple of things come to mind. One is, for instance, the whole phenomenon of Apple and Steve Jobs, where what we really have is a person who didn't define product by market research or by what the market was asking, but defined product by a sense of intuition that tapped into something else, and that created market as an outcome of that. Or similarly, if we think about the phenomena of internet, this is something that emerged organically and embraced the whole world in a way that allows the whole world to become a part of it in a very progressive kind of way. So if we were to get a sense for what those kind of movements stand for, we get a sense for what we're talking about when we say that these heroes really lead the development at this kind of level and what that means. So when we think about 2012, the fact of the matter is that we can see that there's many different dynamics that exist around the world, and we know when we're at the physical level, or we know we're at the vital level. We know when we're breaking through into this era of questioning, and then deeper questioning, and then intuition. But the point being is that we're talking about this pattern of sustainable progress that's imprinted in small spaces, in large spaces, and in larger spaces, so from the micro to the macro. And we have this implicit sense of direction, this map, if you will, that's going to indicate to us how we move out of one area into the next, and what's required to move out of one area into another area. And this is all available to us in 2012 as we begin to look at what's possible and what's been created as a starting point for this. So just summarizing, it's like the need, the leadership need is, when you look at, say, a hand, it's not just a physical object that's defined by what we see with our eyes, but there's the possibility that this hand becomes the instrument for an action that unites something that's far more deep and far-reaching and needed with the current need of today. And that's what we're talking about. That's what needs to happen in the realm of leadership, and that's where we need to drive all these different world dynamics towards.